Hey folks, it's Sam, and I'm making this recording here at the end of June 2023 as we're on the verge of the Venus retrograde cycle that's coming up. You can get a retrograde web class that I just taught, or it's actually a class that I taught many years ago, and I just updated parts of it. It's a very comprehensive course on how to understand retrograde planets. You can just register for that. There's a link here. One thing I haven't heard is the last time Venus went retrograde in Leo, between Leo and Cancer, when it toggled back and forth between Leo and Cancer, was 8 years ago. The summer of 2015. Does that sound familiar? Well, the summer of 2015 was really when the world was shocked by the new Republican presidential contender, Donald Trump. And in particular, what happened in that Venus retrograde cycle, it went into his first house and then went back into Cancer, his 12th house. This was right at the time when one of his biggest controversies emerged when he made the comment to the Fox reporter Megyn Kelly that she had blood coming out of her eyes, blood coming out of her wherever. Remember that amazing watershed moment in U.S. history, and how shocked we were that a presidential candidate would speak like that, and how shocked we were that someone would say this stuff, and how it didn't seem possible that someone could speak like that with such vulgarity, frankly, and still be considered a serious presidential nominee. Well, those were quaint and innocent days indeed, weren't they now? It was 8 years ago. So this is just to sort of illustrate the nature of the Venus retrograde cycles as well. They go in 8-year cycles. Venus will go retrograde, every 8 years. It's now in this lifetime for you between like the Leo Cancer, and then sometimes it's Taurus, other times it's like Capricorn, Sagittarius area. So it's interesting to look back on your life, remember that time in your life, and I refer to it because you will have, certain touchstones in your life from 2015 with, let's say, relationships. That's a big one, of course, because Venus is the indicator of our agreements and the agreements that we make to satisfy our desires with others. So we all know that we all want to get along with others, and we want to satisfy and fulfill certain desires with others, not the least of which are things like sexuality and, wanting to share beauty and happiness with others. But what's the price we're willing to pay to do that? Venus wants to say, okay, I'll give you this if you give me that. See how nice and sweet I am? I'll be nice and sweet if you're nice and sweet back to me. But is it sincere? Do we really mean it? And do we feel good about that agreement? That's the big thing with Venus. How well do we make agreements that we're comfortable with, that we're happy with? And Venus is actually very close to Mars in the sky right now. They're both in the sign of Cancer. Again, Venus is about to go retrograde in about a month, but it's interesting to see it now very close to Mars, which is the planetary energy that says, well, I'm not comfortable trading that. I'll trade this, but I don't want to trade that. And so we're always calibrating the compromises that we have to make and the things that we're willing to give against the things that feel like, well, but that's too much. I'm not going to give that. And I have to assert my individuality here, which is the Mars equation. And so this is very important stuff right now. And as a touchstone for you, go back and look at 8 years ago. I mentioned the Trump episode because we all remember his emergence that summer. And that was the last time Venus went retrograde. And again, you can even see how Venus retrograde for him was this, blood coming out of her wherever sort of thing. And again, a very Venus retrograde moment in general, just because it showed his, belligerence and misogyny and things like that. And again, at the time we were shocked that we would hear that. Look at where we are now, how far away we are from that. And you can even look at his, life now since those 8 years. But I remember at the time when this exploded and this Venus retrograde cycle, and I said at the time that it was before that happened, actually, when people were saying, is he for real? Do you think he could get the nomination? And at the time, again, because it was so shocking, I was like, look, I don't think he will. I think he's going to, blow himself up, burn himself out. I don't think he even really wants to. He doesn't want to be president. He just wants to. It's just a lot of self-promotion. And I said at the time, I said, we'll see what happens if Venus can get through his first house, because Venus is going to go into his first house, go retrograde back into the 12th house, then go through his first house again, go through Leo. And I said, if he gets through that, like if he gets through this transit of Venus going in his first house, retrograde, and then back again, then he definitely has the Dasha cycle. The Dasha cycle he was in, which was Rahu Mars, was definitely formidable, and it was probably the most powerful he would be in his life. As far as to win something, right? Rahu Mars, I said, if he can get through this transit, he could be very formidable. And he could even win the nomination. He could even be president with that Rahu Mars Dasha. But again, everything is not that simple. He had to get through this. And I said at the time it wasn't that bold of a prediction. It was actually correct. But I said look for some scandals to come out about, women, sexual cheating or sexual abuse allegations to come out. I said it before the retrograde happened. And then again, once the retrograde happened, this thing with Megyn Kelly was said. The other thing that came out around that time, and again, because I live this in real time, I've been doing this stuff a long time. This was also when the thing came out about his first wife, Ivana, and her allegations that Trump raped her in the book. And that came out. Now, you didn't have all of these allegations from women having affairs. That didn't come out then. But again, this was in the very nascent parts of that Republican campaign, and really all the other Republican nominees, or the Republican challengers, were all waiting to see Trump blow himself up, and they handled him with kid gloves because they were waiting for him, that the scandals would be so big that he would just kind of get out. But he didn't do it, obviously. We now see what happened. But that time of Venus retrograde, Venus going into his first house, going retrograde, then going through his first house again, this was when what would have sunk many other candidates, even a comment like that blood coming out of her wherever sort of thing. Again, remember how shocked everyone was. And the Republican establishment at that time really turned against him. They were disgusted by him, and that includes what's it called, CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Committee. All of these Republican groups formally came out against him after that, and he's beneath us. Well, of course, they got on their knees soon enough later, but at that time, this was going on. So again, the Venus retrograde, in many ways, even in his case, it showed this sort of gaffe, you might say, but it also showed our reversal in what we expect from a candidate, because again, it wouldn't be even a year later. It would be about a year later that he had the Access Hollywood tape leaked, and everybody was like, whatever, we don't care about that stuff now. So even culturally, again, Venus retrograde, the last time it went through Leo, which is what I'll be doing now, showed this. You could look at this in the collective consciousness. We don't care anymore about that, right? At least we don't care about it with him. If you're enough of a, if you say enough things that enough people want to rally around, particularly things that are divisive to others. If you're willing to own the libs and push back against all these other things that people don't like, they'll overlook anything. And certainly things like that. So you can see how far we've come, even in the country. And that includes things like now, women don't have the right to choose. Again, look at what happened the last time, 8 years ago. Since that man was elected, all these Supreme Court justices were appointed, and now women's right to a safe and legal abortion is not guaranteed by any means now. It's under threat and duress even more. One of the ways you can see this too as a function of government is because Leo is the sign of the government. Again, Venus is related to women. It's also related, obviously, to sex, sexuality, reproductive, whatever. So we wound up electing the person who appointed the judges who overturned that law. Again, this also happened the last Venus retrograde cycle in Leo, last Venus retrograde in Leo, if I didn't make that clear. It's also gone retrograde 2 other times since then in those 8 years. But in Leo, that was 8 years ago. So look at 8 years ago of what was going on in your life and how much there might be a parallel to the times that we're living in now, and see how that lines up for you. You can get a retrograde web class that I just taught, or it's actually a class that I taught many years ago, and I just updated parts of it. It's a very comprehensive course on how to understand retrograde planets. You can just register for that. There's a link here. Look at your life and some parallel lines back to the summer of 2015, and you might notice some pretty interesting things. Thanks. Please find me on YouTube at Sam Jeppy, Vedic Astrology Teacher. On there since 2007, thousands of hours of classes. Also on Facebook at Astrology Teacher, tons of articles updated regularly, and I'm on Instagram at Vedic Astrology 108, ongoing updates and interaction. For a limited time, I'm offering 10 hours of masterclasses, Yoga and Vedic Astrology, Quantum Vedic Astrology, and Spiritual Astrology Masterclass. These are 3 great courses that will really help you a lot. Now, in case you don't know who I am, I taught the Astraved certification course, Dattatreya Shiva Baba, in 2010. Ravi Shankar published my book in 2018. I've been around for decades. I've been teaching these great classes, and if you go to VedicAstrologyEssentials.com, you can get this 90% off discount of these 3 great classes, more than 10 hours, guaranteed value. You can check this out. These 3 classes will give you all the necessary tools to begin to learn Vedic astrology. Please find me on YouTube at Sam Jeppy, Vedic Astrology Teacher. On there since 2007, thousands of hours of classes. Also on Facebook at Astrology Teacher, tons of articles updated regularly, and I'm on Instagram at Vedic Astrology 108, ongoing updates and interaction.